The waiting room at the Brampton Civic Hospital smelled like floor cleaner and old coffee, and I had been sitting in the same plastic chair for 40 minutes when the woman beside me leaned over and slid a folded piece of paper onto my lap. She was older than me, maybe 75, with white hair cut close to her head and a wool coat the color of a pine tree. I had not spoken to her. We had not even made eye contact. I had been looking at my hands, turning my wedding ring around and around the way I do when I am nervous, which I was all because my daughters had driven me to this appointment and then disappeared to find parking 20 minutes before my name was called, so I had walked in alone. The woman did not look at me when she placed the paper in my lap. She just said, quietly, "The way you say something when you do not want anyone else to hear. Read this when you are alone tonight, not before." I looked up. She was already facing forward again, her hands folded over her purse. "I'm sorry," I said. But then the nurse called my name, and when I looked back, the seat beside me was empty. I do not know how she left so quickly. The chair had not made a sound. The door at the end of the hall had not opened. She was simply gone, the way a thought is gone when something startles you out of it. I stood there for a moment holding the folded paper, and the nurse called my name again, and I tucked it into the inside pocket of my coat and walked through the door. My name is not important. What I am is a 67-year-old woman who retired 3 years ago from 28 years of working as a records administrator at a school board in Brampton, Ontario. I live in the house my husband, Terence, and I bought in 1991 when our daughter was 4, and this neighborhood was still mostly farmland and mud. Terence died 11 months ago. Cancer, the kind that moves fast and does not apologize. He was here in September and gone by February, and the house that had always felt full became a house that echoed. My daughter, I will call her my daughter, because that is who she is to me, and that is how I have always thought of her, moved back in 6 weeks after the funeral. She said it was because she was worried about me. She said the commute from Mississauga was getting to be too much anyway. She said it made sense. Her husband came with her. I want to be careful here, because I am not a person who thinks badly of people without reason. I had known my son-in-law for 9 years by then. He was not a cruel man in obvious ways. He did not shout. He did not drink. He was the kind of man who held doors open and remembered to say thank you. And for a long time I thought that was the same thing as being kind. But I noticed, in those first weeks after they moved in, that certain questions came up with a regularity that did not feel accidental. What had Terence done with his RRSP accounts? Whether the house had been assessed recently? What I planned to do with the property in Collingwood? A small piece of land Terence had inherited from his uncle, about 40 acres north of town, with a cabin on it that we used maybe twice a year. My son-in-law asked about the Collingwood property more than once, in different conversations, on different days, in ways that were always casual, always sideways, never quite direct enough that I could address them head-on without feeling like I was being accusatory. I told myself I was being sensitive, that grief makes you read things into people, that he was probably just trying to understand the family's financial situation so he could help. I told myself that right up until the morning I found the document. It was a Thursday in October, about 2 months after they moved in. I had come downstairs early, before 6, the way I do now that I live alone in the sense that counts. Alone inside the house, even when other people are in it. My son-in-law had left a folder on the kitchen table. He had left it open. I was not trying to look at it. I was reaching past it to get the kettle, and I saw my name and Terrence's name, and the words power of attorney and transfer of title. I stood very still. The document was something he had printed. It was not official. It was a template, the kind you find on legal websites, half filled in, with names inserted in the highlighted fields. My name was in the field marked grantor. My son-in-law's name was in the field marked attorney. The Collingwood property address was listed under assets to be transferred. I folded the kettle back down without filling it. I went upstairs. I sat on the edge of my bed for a very long time. I did not say anything that day. I did not say anything the next day either. I told myself there could be an explanation. I told myself I would ask my daughter about it when the moment was right. I told myself I was probably misunderstanding something. But I also took a photograph of the document with my phone before I left the kitchen. I do not know why I did that. Something in me knew to. The hospital appointment that November was a follow-up, nothing serious. A blood pressure check and some routine blood work that my doctor had been after me to do for months. I had put it off. I had put everything off. When you lose a husband and then have other people move into your house, you stop having time that belongs to you. I had not told my daughter what time the appointment was. She had found out because she had started, without asking me, checking the calendar on the refrigerator where I had always written down my appointments. She had offered to drive me. I had said yes because saying no felt ungrateful, and I did not want to seem ungrateful even then. She dropped me at the door and said she would park and meet me inside. She did not come inside. When I came out of the appointment 40 minutes later, she was sitting in the car in the drop-off lane scrolling on her phone. She had not parked at all. I noticed. I did not say anything. The paper from the woman in the waiting room was still in my coat pocket. I had thought about it during the appointment, turning it over in my mind the way I had been turning my ring. The nurse had asked if I was stressed, and I had laughed. The short kind of laugh that is not actually a laugh. That evening my daughter made dinner, pasta, the jarred sauce, which was fine, and my son-in-law talked about his work and the traffic on the 410 and a hockey game I had not watched. After dinner I washed the dishes and said I was tired and went upstairs. I sat in the chair by the window in my bedroom, the one Terrence used to sit in when he read, and I unfolded the piece of paper. It was not long. The handwriting was careful. The letters formed the way people wrote before everything became typing. It said, "I knew your husband. He was a good man, and he was worried about you. The Collingwood property is worth more than you know. There is a survey report filed with the county in August. Look it up. Do not sign anything. And do not tell your son-in-law that you know." That was all. I read it twice. I read it a third time. Then I sat in Terrence's chair for a long time watching the street outside, where the maple tree we had planted when our daughter was 8 had finally gotten tall enough to block the streetlight. And I thought about what it meant that my dead husband had been worried about me. I need to explain about the Collingwood property, because I did not understand it properly until that night, and maybe you will understand it better than I did. Terrence had never talked about the land as something valuable. It was 40 acres of second-growth bush and an old cabin with a wood stove and a pump that sometimes worked and sometimes didn't. We went up there in the summers when our daughter was young. She had loved it as a child and stopped loving it as a teenager, the way teenagers do. And then we had kept going on our own, Terrence and I, a long weekend in June, and sometimes one in September. It was the place where we had no internet and no obligations, and we played cards and walked the trail along the creek. And I read 3 books in a row, and Terence was the most relaxed I ever saw him. I had thought of it as a retreat. I had not thought of it as an asset. But that night, after I read the note, I did what the woman had told me to do. I opened my laptop and I searched for survey reports filed with Simcoe County, and it took me a while because I did not entirely know what I was looking for. But eventually I found a reference in a planning notice to a mineral assessment conducted on a parcel in that area. I read words I did not fully understand: aggregate deposits, gravel extraction potential, estimated volume, and I found, on a government portal that required me to create an account, a document that included my property's lot and concession number in a list of parcels assessed for commercial development potential. The assessed value was not what was on our property tax bill. It was not even close. I sat there at my kitchen table at 11:30 at night, and I understood, for the first time, why my son-in-law kept asking about Collingwood. I understood why there was a power of attorney template on my kitchen table with my name in it. I understood why my daughter had started monitoring the calendar on the refrigerator. I also understood that Terence had known, that he had been trying to tell me, somehow before he died, and had not managed to, or had not wanted to frighten me, or had found another way. This woman, this stranger with white hair and a pine green coat, to make sure I found out when I needed to. I did not sleep that night. The next 2 weeks I moved carefully. I did not change anything. I made dinner and washed dishes and asked my son-in-law polite questions about his work, and I did not mention the survey, and I did not mention the document I had photographed, and I did not mention the woman at the hospital. I also called a lawyer. I had not had a lawyer since Terence and I bought the house. The one we had used had retired. I found a new one through a recommendation from a woman, a woman I had worked with for 12 years at the school board, who had gone through a complicated estate situation with her own family a few years before. The lawyer's name was on a card my former colleague texted me, and her office was in downtown Brampton, and I made the appointment on a Tuesday afternoon, while my daughter was at her own doctor, and my son-in-law was at work, and I told no one where I was going. The lawyer was a woman about 10 years younger than me, precise and unhurried, and she listened to everything I said without interrupting. I showed her the photograph of the document. I showed her the survey information I had found. I told her about the note. She said the document was not legally enforceable as it stood. It was a template that had not been witnessed or notarized, and a power of attorney obtained under false pretenses or through undue influence could be challenged. She said the more important question was whether I had ever signed anything since Terence died that I did not fully understand. I thought about it. I said I did not think so. She said to think harder and to gather everything. Every document I had signed in the past year, every financial statement, the will, the estate papers. She also said that if my son-in-law had been attempting to have me sign over property without my informed consent, that could constitute elder financial abuse under Ontario law. She said it quietly. The way the woman at the hospital had said read this: "When you are alone tonight," and the words landed the same way. I drove home and sat in the driveway for 10 minutes before going inside. It came apart on a Saturday. My son-in-law put a document in front of me at the kitchen table. He had printed it fresh, and it was not a template this time. It was a proper form, notarized header, clean margins. He said a notary was coming that afternoon. He said it was just to help me manage the Collingwood property now that I was on my own. He said it was just so there would be someone to handle things if anything happened to me. He said it with a tone that suggested I was lucky someone was taking this on. My daughter sat across from me. She did not look at me. She looked at her hands. I looked at the document. I looked at my daughter. I thought about all the summers she had come up to Collingwood with us, the way she had called out to us from the dock when she was small, the way she had looked at Terence and me when she thought we weren't watching, that look children have when they feel safe. I thought about how that look disappears if you are not careful. I thought about how it had disappeared and when, I said very calmly, I've spoken to a lawyer. The room changed. My son-in-law said, what lawyer? I told him her name and the name of her firm. I said I had retained her. I said I had also been in contact with the county to place a note on the title of the Collingwood property that would require independent legal sign-off on any transfer. I had done this the day before, following instructions my lawyer had given me by email. He said I was being paranoid. He said he was only trying to help. He said this was insulting after everything they had done for me since Terence died. I looked at my daughter. She was still looking at her hands. I said, I found the template. She looked up. I said, the power of attorney template you left on the table in October. I photographed it. I looked at my son-in-law. Your name was in it. The Collingwood property was listed. I paused. I've been waiting 2 months to understand what the right thing to do was. No one said anything. Then my daughter said very quietly, he said it was just a draft. He said we would talk to you about it. Her husband said her name. She said, we were going to talk to you about it. He said her name again, sharp, and she stopped. That was when I knew with certainty what I had been trying not to know. It was not just him. She had known. Maybe she had not understood the full shape of what he was planning. Maybe she had told herself a version of it that seemed acceptable. But she had known there was a document, and she had said nothing to me. I asked them both to leave. My son-in-law said I could not ask them to leave. He said they had been living here for 5 months. He used the word rights. And I will say this, he was wrong about that, both legally and morally, but I did not argue with him about the law in my own kitchen. I called the non-emergency line for Peel Regional Police that evening, not to have them removed by force, but to speak to someone who could advise me. A constable came to the door, a young woman who was very patient. She explained my options. She said, because it was my property, and they had no tenancy agreement and no financial arrangement. I had never charged them rent, had never signed anything formalizing their stay. I had the right to ask them to leave and to involve the police if they did not. She also, before she left, gave me a card for a service that assists older adults navigating financial exploitation situations. She said it mattered that I had documentation. She said a lot of people in my position did not. My daughter left the next morning. She did not say goodbye. She came downstairs while I was making tea, rolled a suitcase through the kitchen, paused at the back door with her hand on the frame, and then walked out. My son-in-law was already in the car. I heard the car back out of the driveway. I stood at the counter and poured my tea and watched the steam rise. I want to tell you about what happened after, because I think people imagine a clean ending when there is not one. My daughter and I did not speak for 4 months. The lawyer continued to handle the title note on the Collingwood property. I got a full financial review done, my RRSP, the estate accounts. Everything Terence had left, and nothing had been touched without my knowledge. The template was only a template. They had not yet done anything that constituted a crime, technically, though my lawyer used the word yet, with a meaningful pause. In January, I drove up to Collingwood alone. I had not been since before Terence got sick. The road was icy past Barry, and I drove slowly. The cabin was cold, and it took me an hour to get the wood stove going properly. But eventually it caught, and I sat in the chair by the window and looked out at the snow on the creek, and I felt, for the first time since February, something that was not grief. I thought about the woman at the hospital. I had tried to find her. I had asked at the reception desk, described her. The white hair, the pine green coat. The receptionist had been apologetic and said she couldn't share patient information. I had expected that, but I wanted to say thank you. I wanted to tell her it had worked. I thought about Terence, about what it must have taken to find that woman, to ask her to do this for me. I do not know how he found her. I do not know if they knew each other from before, or if he had made contact in those last months when he knew what was coming and was trying to put things in order in ways I could not see. He was that kind of person, the kind who solved problems quietly, who made arrangements without making you feel like you needed to be managed. I had loved that about him for 34 years, and I had not known, until then, how much of it had been on my behalf. In March, I called my daughter. I want to say that conversation was healing, and that she apologized, and that we wept together, and that something was restored. Some of that is true. She did apologize. She said she had not understood how far it had gone, that she had kept telling herself it would be fine, that she had not wanted to choose between us. I said I understood that, partly, and I did, partly. But I also said that when she sat at the table and did not look at me, she had already chosen, and that is not the kind of thing you can fully take back. We are in contact now. It is cautious and sometimes strange, and I do not fully trust her yet, and I think she knows that. Her husband and I have not spoken. My lawyer advised me to keep it that way for now. There is something I keep returning to, something the woman at the hospital could not have known she was giving me. When I read the note that night in Terence's chair, the first thing I felt was fear. That is the obvious thing to feel. But the second thing I felt, and it came very quickly after, was something I did not have a word for at first. It took me a while to realize it was the feeling of being seen. When you are a woman of a certain age, and you live alone, and you have just lost your husband, the world has a way of making you feel like a problem to be administered. People use a tone, a very specific tone, gentle and slightly too slow, as if you have become fragile in the night. My son-in-law used it. Some of the medical staff used it. Even a few well-meaning friends used it without knowing they were doing it. That note did not use that tone. That note assumed I was capable. It gave me information and trusted me to act on it. It did not explain what to do or tell me I should not be alone. It gave me facts and left the rest to me. I am not sure Terence always did that, if I am honest. He protected me, which is different. He handled things quietly, which is loving, but it is also, sometimes, a way of deciding that someone else cannot handle the truth. He had been afraid to tell me about the Collingwood property, afraid it would worry me, afraid I would feel the weight of it. So instead he had sent a stranger to deliver the weight after he was gone. I forgave him for that. I told him out loud, in the cabin at Collingwood with the stove going and the snow on the creek, that I forgave him and that I wished he had told me himself. I also told him I had handled it And I had. I want to make sure that is clear. Not because of the note, not because of the lawyer, not because of the constable or the title notation, or any of the things that were done for me or given to me. Those helped. I am glad I had them. But I had taken the photograph. That was me standing in my kitchen before 6 in the morning, something telling me to record what I had seen. Nobody told me to do that. No note, no stranger, no dead husband sending messages through white-haired women in hospital waiting rooms. That was just me, knowing what I knew and trusting it. I have been trying since then to do more of that. The Collingwood property is still mine. I went back in May when the creek was running high, and I walked the trail Terrence, and I had always walked, and I startled a heron off the bank and watched it go. That slow, enormous way herons have of lifting, like they are not sure flight is worth the effort, and then they do it anyway. I stayed 3 days. I came home to a house that was mine. That was enough. That was, I have decided, exactly enough.